name's Tracie Maglosky, and I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio. And today we're going to talk about child, family, and couple photography. So couples photography is a special place in my heart because I'm also a wedding photographer, and a large part of wedding photography is portraiture. I own a studio in Cincinnati, and we have about 1,800 square feet, wide open space, hardwood floors, big beautiful windows, and a wonderful client base that supports us and loves our work and loves coming into the studio. With that said, most often we're shooting on location. So even though it's great having a studio, a lot of times the best light and the best work that I do is outside. When we start talking about child photography, we'll get into a little bit more about that location thing, which is really huge. In our studio, we focus on brides, babies, and beauty. So we bring brides and grooms into the studio. We get to do their weddings, and then they end up they end up calling us a few years later and say, we're having a baby. And then we do maternity photography and newborn photography and family photography, and it just kind of goes from there naturally. In 2012, I think, I was invited to be a part of the visionary program at Olympus. And what that program allows for me to do is things like this, where I get to travel around the country and meet other photographers who are aspiring to learn, and that's what we're all doing. So it has given me a great opportunity to travel around, share my work, talk to other photographers, find out what you're going through, try to help you to get to the next place, wherever that is for you. And the thing I love to ask everyone is, who in this room loves getting your picture taken? Raise your hand. No. Usually I have one crazy person who's like, me. I don't like having my picture taken either, and I really do not like being recorded, oh, hi back there. And but they're recording anyways. But the point is that whenever I'm talking about portraiture, in the back of my mind, every time I pick my camera up and point it at someone, I realize that to them it might feel like a loaded gun. So in my mind, I'm always thinking, how can I diffuse that? How do I tear down that structure that they already have in their minds that they don't want me pointing that thing at them? And so because I hate getting my picture taken, I'm very sympathetic to others who don't like having their picture taken, which is most people. Our studio also gets the chance to do WABN and Cincinnati Belle fireworks on the river every year. And the reason I do that is just a little mad break from doing portraiture, and fireworks don't need to be posed. They just show up and we take pictures of them. And it's a great way for me to kind of step out of my comfort zone and do something different. We've been voted Cincinnati's best portrait photographer for a few years in the running. And it's a great testimony to our clients and how much they love working with us because we love what we do. We also give back in the community to the schools and several foundations, including Sisterhood Connections, March of Dimes, Make-A-Wish Foundation, and Green Drinks. So let's get into this thing. And the very first thing I love to say in classes is that every time I'm sharing my work, I want you to know that I'm showing you my best stuff. But behind all that best stuff is also like a billion mistakes. So as you're going through your journey in photography and you're learning and you're growing, just know that all the people who come into B&H and everywhere else and speak or online, wherever you look at your classes, they all have work that isn't as good as the work that you're seeing. And so I love mistakes because I welcome them into my life because I realize that every mistake gets me closer to the end goal of getting the image that I really want. I only put this up here so that you could read it for yourselves, but the best part is don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice, and most important, have the courage to follow your own heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. So with that said, why do I share that with you? Because I'm going to tell you all of my opinions today about how I've done my business and how I take my images, but that's just my way. And you're going to find your own ways in certain things. And you'll try my way and it might not work for you. And that's okay, because there are more than one way to get there. So let's talk about families and children. Today, most of this slideshow is going to be a lot of images. And the reason why I do a lot of images in my slideshows is because you're all photographers. And so you're visually stimulated. And so I feel like if I show you images, it's going to give you a lot better representation of what I'm trying to teach you or what I'm trying to share from my perspective than if I showed you a bunch of diagrams. So we'll go through the very first part of this is me showing you what I love to do. And then I'm going to show you what I do most of the time. Okay? And there's a difference because my creative side wants to do the things that I want to do, but there's another side to the business that has to be done as well. And it's not that I don't like that, it's just that there's something that I crave to do, which is creating images like this of children and taking them maybe out of what's a real 2-year-old would not be doing this. Okay? Who has a 2-year-old? Raise your hand. Who knows a 2-year-old? Raise your hand. Okay, they don't do that ever unless they're sleeping or sick. Okay, so when we start talking about what I love to do is taking a child and putting them into a situation that is kind of fantastical. And that's my favorite thing to do, okay? When we talk about creating images with children, we have to ask ourselves several questions. How many of you have children? Can you raise your hands for me? How many of you have grandchildren? Raise your hands. Okay. How many of you have been in a situation where someone has told you how great your child was, and then you were like, what? What kid was that you were talking? Okay, so it's not just me. And one of the things that I go into every session knowing, as soon as someone calls me and I pick up the phone and we're trying to schedule a session, I want to know about my location and the time of day, the temperature, and what activities are around. I'm not going to take a child to a park that has a playground and ask them not to play on the playground. If I don't want pictures on swings, we don't go near the swings. Because as soon as they see the swing set or the slide, that's their natural inclination to want to go play there. And they're being punished if they can't, so we can't do that. So we're going to choose a location that makes sense, that doesn't have something interesting that they're going to want to not take pictures for. The second thing is, what time of day is it? If I'm in the heat of the sun, I'm not going to choose a location that's a wide open field. So I'm not going at noon into a wide open cornfield and thinking I'm going to have great light, because my shadows are going to be harsh and the highlights are going to be way blown. When someone calls me, I ask this question first: what time is nap time? Because I already know I'm not going to shoot at nap time. And I'm not going to shoot if it's a feeding time. And maybe some of you know this term, but have you ever heard of the witching hour? That 1 hour of the day that the baby screams and no one knows why, and you look for pins in the diaper, and you look to see if they cut their finger off or whatever, and there's nothing wrong. It's just, it's time for the baby to cry, and they do. And so during that time, parents know every time I say, when is the witching hour? And we don't schedule during the witching hour. With kids, if you come armed with games and bribes, you have a lot better chance of getting any images. So whether it's goldfish or candy or a game that you're going to play, in this particular instance, we were playing a game. And the game was, can you show me how you say your bedtime prayers? And so we were able to get an image, a moment that we were able to freeze just because she was doing what she wanted to do. And so it worked. Go in with your posing ideas and everything already set, because as soon as you get there, you've got about 5 seconds before they get comfortable. And once they get comfortable, then you're running. And I'm just being honest. Kids run and play, and unless you're willing to do that, you should not do child portraits, because that's what you're going to do all the time. Earlier when I mentioned, like, how many of you have had somebody say, you know, your kid was so good, and you're like, man, I don't know, I didn't experience that, but it's something that I call the mom and dad factor. So when I get a child into the studio, I notice that a 2, 3, 4-year-old is going to react to mom and dad and give a little bit more of a show than they would if mom and dad weren't right there. So if I can ask mom and dad to just step aside for a second, or if I can maybe ask mom and dad to do a job so they don't feel like I'm kicking them out, it makes it a little bit easier for me to connect with the child without the distraction of mom and dad are watching, I should do something crazy. Does that make sense? Okay. So once we get there and we're telling each other stories, and I know how she does her bedtime prayers, and I know what she's doing, I'm able to ask her to do them again when she's standing up. And all of a sudden, I'm in a situation where she trusts me. And that's the whole entire point of the thing, is that kids are just like you and me, and they want to feel connected. And as soon as I have the connection, then I can get the images. And this is universal. I mean, it really, really is universal. Again, I'm showing you things I love to do. So I love to take a child and put them into kind of a more fantastical situation. I like to costume, and I like to think up a plan, an idea, and then I like to take all of the elements and style the session around what I want. In these sessions, my clients are paying me way more than they are for a regular milestone session, which is what I call a session that we're just re-upping pictures because they haven't been in a year or whatever. So these sessions, they're paying me so that I can go do the costuming, and I can spend 2 hours with them, and I can do everything that I want to do, and they literally have zero control because this is my baby. And again, I'll reiterate the play thing, because with kids, the only thing you have is playing with them, because that's their language. So as soon as they know that they can play and they can do their thing that they love to do, you have them. And they're going to do whatever you want them to do. For those of you who are going to ask me this later, I'll just tell you right now, these wings are not real. They are photoshopped in. So if you were in Jay's class earlier, I kind of had to laugh a little bit, because Jay does a different type of photography, which is photojournalism, which is what happened is what happened. But I do portraiture, and so I can make whatever happen I want to make happen. And so, and honestly, that the other kind would not be good for me, because I'm too much of a control freak. So you'll see as we go through, we're just doing regular everyday things, but we upped it a notch by adding wings. And the girls love these images because they feel like they're actually fairies. And as soon as you give a child something that they can imagine and pretend, they will go with it forever. A couple years ago in the studio, last year in the studio, everybody know the movie Frozen? So, right? So Frozen is this huge phenomena, and we decided we were going to do a Frozen set in the studio, and I just kind of came up with this random idea. I was like, well, I wonder if anybody would come in and do that. So we offered costuming, makeup, and asked the girls to come into the studio. They got a 20-minute session, and they got 5 images. So they came in, and these little girls from the ages 2 to 10 came into the studio, and as soon as they were in costume, had their makeup on, it was like their supermodel came out. And they felt like they were Elsa. And so as soon as we gave them the ability to play and pretend and get into character, we had a blowout, amazing time. And I'm always looking for new ways to give kids an opportunity to express their inside of their minds, what they actually pretend in their heads. And as soon as we do that, you've got them. When we go down to like a place like this with the creek bed, and we've ordered dresses and we know exactly what we're doing, and we get down, we actually do let the kids play and get dirty. Because I can fix any dirt or whatever in Photoshop, and I really try not to be restrictive of their expression, because that's the most important thing to me as I do this. And again, I'm just reminding you, this is what I love to do. So I love creating these images where I can let them do whatever they want to do within their own realm of creativity. And in our studio, we do probably 200, I think we last year did 261 sessions in a year. So we're going, it's a daily thing. And back to this part about making mistakes, and then we're going to talk a little bit about lighting. Let yourself be okay with making the mistakes, and learn to treasure and embrace them, because they really are the foundation of how you become a master at anything. And so if I could encourage you in anything today, if you are not taking pictures every single day and you don't hate half of them, you're probably not photographing enough. And so continue your processes and don't give up on yourself, because nobody walks into this thing and is awesome. No one. And so again, this theme, we did a dress-up theme. And I want to talk about lighting, because a lot of times I think it gets overcomplicated, and then people get lost and they feel frustrated and they just want to put their camera down because they're too afraid. And so as we talk about lighting today, I just want to talk about how to get light, how to make your light quality better, and how to create light if you don't have enough, okay? How many of you in here make money off of your photography? You sell it. Okay, that's a good number. How many of you want to? Raise your hand. Okay. And how many of you would consider yourselves semi-professional photographers? You make money, you want to get better, you want to make more money. How many of you exclusively do photography? Exclusively? Okay. How many of you do regularly, on a regular basis, you do child photography? Okay. That's a really great number. Okay. I'm really encouraged today when I come into a portraiture class situation and there are so many people interested in portraiture, because we really do have in this field a lack of awesome photographers. And you know, there are a million people that have cameras on their phones and whatever and all of that, but people who are really invested in creating a better education for themselves, it's an amazing thing to see. So thank you for being here. Let me go through this session. Now, for those of you who wonder, a lot of my work that I do with these specialized sessions that I'm doing, which I call muse sessions, I do my Photoshop work afterwards. I do bring in, maybe like in this one, you can see that there's a burst. Okay, so I am adding a burst. But that's about it in terms of everything else. Her makeup was actually done. So this is an opportunity for a family to come in and see their child in a different light. The beautiful thing about this little girl is that in 12 years, when she is a young adult, in 8 years when she's a teenager, she is never going to forget how beautiful she looks in these images. And women every day are barraged with body issues and issues about how they look. And I love creating an opportunity like this for a young lady to already have a foundation where she feels beautiful. So this is part of my mission and what I love to do. You can see all the different looks she gave me too. She's awesome. So again, going back to lighting, if I'm in a situation like this and I have a beautiful sky, I want to use that sky. So I'm going to make sure that I have totally metered for exactly what I want the sky to look like, and then I'm going to light my subject afterwards. How many of you use flash, off-camera flash? Okay. How many of you you go on a shoot and you take, big, huge strobes with you? Anybody? Okay, just a couple people. So one of my greatest nemesises and so far in photography was learning my off-camera flash techniques. It is one of the most frustrating things in the world, and I'm going to give you just a few tips because I don't want to be overwhelming today, but I'm going to give you just a few tips so that you're not questioning why sometimes when you take a picture with your flash blasts somebody with light and they're all washed out, and then sometimes you take a picture and they're all dark. And you're like, I don't get it, what's going on? So we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. So again, I'm going to meter for my background, and then I'm going to light my subject afterwards. Every single time. Now, this is what I usually do. Okay, remember what I was saying? I love to do that. This is what I usually do. Usually I have a family call me and say, oh, Ryan's going to be 3 months old or 6 months old, and we need to, get pictures of her 6-month session. And so then I know what's going to happen. I'm going to bring a 6-month-old in, and I've got about 20 minutes, half an hour tops, where I'm going to have the baby's attention and where they're not going to be sick of getting their pictures taken. So I already know my plan. I'm going to do belly shots. I'm going to do seated shots. I'm going to do shots with mom and dad, and I already have it down. Okay? But again, I'm going to meter for my background, and then I'm going to light my subject. Every single time. Now we're going to insert some family stuff, because as soon as they come in for that 6-month session, what they're really looking for from me is pictures of the baby, and then they're looking for a family picture. And what they're not looking for that I'm going to give them anyway is a picture of mom and dad together. Because last time mom and dad had a picture together was on their wedding day probably. So I'm going to make them take that shot every single time. And let me tell you why we're going to do that. So for those of you who are in portraiture, this is something that I hope that you will take home with you and really take it to heart. So I look at every opportunity as a chance to help people remember, exactly what this feels like. In our studio, you don't get digitals. So all of our images are given to our clients in print. If you can't commit to printing it, then you don't love it enough. And I haven't done my job. So probably maybe a sore subject with some people, but in our studio, you don't get digital files. No way. So all of our clients get a print, and then they hang it on their wall, and it's a giant business card from me that they will never forget that moment that they had, and guess who was taking the picture? Me. And they can't substitute any other photographer in there for that image. It was me. And so as soon as they look at that image, they're going to remember, oh my gosh, we need to call Tracie because we haven't had pictures since this picture. Look how different we look now. Hopefully that's a good thing. Sometimes it might be, we're so much heavier now. Good thing she knows how to Photoshop or whatever. But I'll tell you, there'll be a time when this couple will face a difficulty together, and maybe they have an argument, or maybe they're not feeling great about their relationship. And this image might be the only thing that takes them back to a time when things were great. And so as a portrait photographer, it behooves me and all of you to do this for people so that they have it in front of themselves, to remind themselves of why they're in this together and what they've created as a family. Does that make sense? And all the photographers said, yes. All right, so we'll go into more about families. So every time I get a family together, I'm always thinking about trying to build a triangle as much as I can in any situation that I can, because it looks best to the eye. So I'm going to try to get my wiggler, who's 1 year old right here, I'm going to try to get him to sit still for one shot. So I've got my little Elmo lens buddy that sits up on top of my lens that makes it look like my lens talking to him. I will break out an iPad and put on their favorite program so that they will look at me. If you have not tried that, I highly recommend it, because it's amazing what the hot dog song will do to a child for 5 seconds. So if you don't know the hot dog song, learn it. And then, puppets, hats, anything squeaky. We use dog toys all the time, which that sounds terrible, but it's actually because they're really squeaky and they make good noise. So bring those things in so that when you're photographing children, you actually stand a fighting chance of having their attention for a second. And it's not because they don't like you. And then sometimes, again, you got to go back to just letting them play. Just let them play, because that's what they want to do. Interactions like this with mom and dad are some of the most memorable and beautiful things that you can give to a family. Because he looks so happy, and he is happy because he's doing what he loves. He's playing. So in a scenario like this, you can see I metered for this guy, and I brought my light in on my subject. So how did I do that? Because dad's holding baby up here like this, right? And so the sky's really bright, because this is not, it's nice and bright outside. And so then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, what are my options? Let's talk about that first. The first option would be bring a reflector in, right? So what happens if I bring a reflector in underneath of a baby? He's going to be distracted. That's true. And his eyes are going to close immediately because it's going to be way too bright. So that's when I have to employ my off-camera flash. So I got to bring my flash in, and I've got to put it underneath the baby. And for those of you who don't use any modifiers on your flash, I just want to encourage you. My favorite modifier system, and I keep hitting my microphone, sorry. My favorite modifier system is called MagMod, and it's a little magnet. You stick it on top of your flash, and then you just stick your different modifiers on top of that. It's like a big rubber band. I'm sure you guys have it here in the store. So you just pull that right over the top of the flash, and then you just sit your modifiers on top, and you have a sphere, which will push light out, make it bigger. You have a bounce that will push light forward, and then you have a snoot where you can direct light any way you want. And any of those are interchangeable at any time. There are also grids so that you can make the light a little bit more directed and softer. And so whenever I'm using something outside like this, I'm going to take that mag sphere, the round one, and I'm going to stick it on top of my flash so that it disperses the light evenly and makes it softer. Does that make sense? So when I'm using my off-camera flash, just from my perspective, I always shoot in manual flash, always, because I want to have control. I also mostly shoot in manual on my camera. So just an FYI there. And every time I do a shoot, just like I showed you before with mom and dad, always giving them that image that they can take home and hang on the wall, I also always try to get a shot with mom and a shot with dad, so that mom and dad both have a shot alone with baby. Why do I do that? Because in 15 years, they might not be a couple anymore. It's just true. It's our reality. And so I am always looking forward to the future. I want people to love these pictures forever. And so sometimes it's nice to have an option to just have mom and baby or dad and baby together, so that later in the future, it's not like, oh, I got to cut that side of the picture out or whatever, you know. So we try to avoid the cutting of the images. So we're always trying to create those special moments. Whenever I'm on shoot too with children and families, I always try to give them 3 things. I try to give them an overview of the entire scene, and then I do a closer shot, and then I do a close-up shot, okay? I always want to give them 3 options for choosing their images, because if they decide to do a giant print, they can do the big overview. And the general rule of thumb that we use in our studio is that if you're going to do a small print, anything like 8 by 10, 11 by 14, the person's face has to be as big as my hand open. And if we're going to do a larger print, 20 by 30, then the person's face has to be as big as my hand closed in a fist. Does that resonate with you? Just for your eyeballs so you can actually see the face. How many of you are selling prints to your people? How many of you print your work? Raise your hand if you regularly print your work. Okay. B&H offers print here, I'm assuming? Yes. Okay. So you have no excuse. Because seeing your work in print turns it away from being a digital image into art. And then you start taking yourself more seriously. I'll never forget when I first started printing, I did these beautiful wedding images, and I took my work and then I got it printed and I brought it back and I was looking at it. I was so excited until I saw a pop can on the sidewalk in the image, this giant image, a pop can down here. But you know what, digitally I didn't notice it. But when I printed it, all of a sudden it became more epic. That can was still there and it just irritated me so much. Learned a big lesson. You know, again, we're taking every opportunity that we can when we're in these sessions. And this is another one where I just had complete control. And I said, this is what I want to do. I want to make a little TP, and that's what we did. All right, so for child photography, let's talk about challenges through the ages just really quickly. For those of you who are just starting this out, or maybe you've been in it for a while and you're wondering why you're having some issues with getting some stuff done. The first thing is, whenever I do a newborn session, people always say to me, when do I come in for my newborn session? And they have no idea, but it needs to be within 10 to 14 days. And the reason is because our baby's going to be most womb-like during that time, still bendy, not as aware, very tired, they were just born, and not eating as often. Sometimes around the 14-day mark, we start getting into cluster feeding, where we want to eat all the time. So we want to try to get them in when they're easiest to manipulate into poses. The biggest clue for those of you, anybody do newborn photography, raise your hand? Okay, then I don't need to tell you this, but I'll tell you anyway. So babies hate being cold because they don't have a thermostat. Their thermostat is not functional yet. So if you bring a baby into a room, even as cold as this one, they will be awake for the entire time. But if you give a baby a room that's 78 to 80 degrees, you're going to have a sleeping baby the entire time. 3-month-olds. The challenge with 3-month-olds, probably my least favorite sessions, just because we really only have like 2 poses. We have holding the baby up, and we have looking over the baby like this, because they have no neck control, but they're wide awake. And so you can get a lot of great expression, but you only really have 2 poses. So that's my least favorite probably of all the sessions. 6 to 9 months, we get sitting up and funny, and personality starts to come out, and we're really starting to get somewhere. 1-year-olds are probably walking, maybe running, and this is where it gets interesting. So whenever I talk about child photography, I'm going to tell you right now, you cannot shoot at a slow shutter speed, or you will miss every single shot, and you'll be so mad at yourself afterwards. So just know you cannot shoot at a slow sputter either. But 200 or better for kids. And if you have the ability in your camera to shoot at a high frame rate, that's also recommended because they are not going to stay still for you. And you don't want to miss it because their personalities are hysterical at this age. At 2, they get even faster and they realize that they are not the same as their mom and dad. So they have their own will and they decide they want to run around and do this and that. And you've heard about the terrible 2s, I'm sure. But really, I think 2-year-olds are misunderstood. And a lot of times they come in with their own agenda, and as long as we give them options, it works out fine. So don't expect a 2-year-old to do anything without getting bribed, like a cookie or a goldfish or whatever. We have stock in that in our studio. 3-year-olds are even stronger, faster, and more strong-willed, and also are hysterical. So if you don't like kids, I'm telling you this is not for you because you will spend most of your time chasing them, and if you do it right, you can catch some of the most amazing moments. 4-year-olds get shy, and I give this recommendation all the time for those of you who are regularly doing child photography and you have a new child come in your studio and they're not sure they want to be photographed because, you know, they just aren't sure if they could really stand being in front of your camera, which happens all the time. Most of them also have a stuffed animal or a friend with them, baby doll, whatever it is. And a lot of times the way that I get my kids to give in and finally let me take pictures is we have one little boy who always brings Curious George doll with him, a little monkey. And Curious George always gets his picture taken first. And then I get to show Quinn Curious George. And then Quinn's like, maybe I could be in a picture with Curious George. And then eventually we get to take a picture of Quinn. So just know sometimes it's giving them what they want a little bit and then coming back to what you want. And usually they're pretty cool about it. 5 to 7-year-olds are funny and silly, and one of my favorite ages because they still believe in magic. And that's why I love doing the shoots that I was showing you at the beginning, is because I love, love, love exploring that magic with children. And somehow along the age of 8 to 12, we start to lose that magic. Like, not many 12-year-olds still believe in Santa or in the Easter Bunny or in the Tooth Fairy or whatever they believed in before. Any kind of magic, it just kind of starts going away. And it's just being grown up. And so I love those ages right before we start losing that magic. Teenagers, I will get into posing with you a little bit today, but teenagers are the hardest group for me because I can't take a girl who's somebody's daughter and make her look too adult, but she doesn't want to look like a child anymore. So it's a challenging age. Okay, a comfort zone is a beautiful place, but nothing ever grows there. How many of you have never taken your flash off your camera? Raise your hand. And it's okay, we're not mad at you. You've all taken your camera off your flash off your camera and shot with it? Everyone has? Okay, I'm impressed. So when you do that, how many of you are shooting with manual flash? You're turning your flash to manual, you're controlling all the settings. Okay, so one of the things that I'm gonna just give you a quick tidbit of why sometimes your flash goes crazy and you think, what is wrong with my flash? Why is it doing that? If you're shooting on auto or FP, then you'll see that when you look at your camera screen in the back and you have that point that reads the metering for you in the middle of your screen, you know what I'm talking about? Where you get your meter reading from. If that is pointed at something dark, your flash thinks that it needs to light up that much. If it's pointed at something light, your flash thinks that it needs to light up that much less. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? So in my experience, like if I'm at a wedding and I have a bride and groom standing up in the front of the church and I'm trying to get their images, and I point my camera and my meter is on the groom's black tuxedo, and I'm not shooting with manual flash, my flash thinks that I am in a pitch black room. And so then it goes bam, and everybody turns into these like translucent, you know, light beings. And you're like, what is going on? Or if I just shift a little bit over and my meter is now on my bride's white dress, then all of a sudden my flash is like, poof. And everybody's dark and you're like, what is going on? So I just want to encourage you that if you turn your flash to manual, you'll have a lot more control over how much light actually comes out of your flash towards your subjects. And I will tell you too that that little teeny head of that flash, that's your light source. So when it's that small, it's going to create not the most beautiful light that you're going to want. So you're going to want to soften your light and add something to that to create a bigger light. A lot of you probably maybe know of like Rogue, flash benders, Gary Fong's, those kinds of things. Anything that can make that light source bigger. So as soon as I stick that flash, that Rogue bender on the back of my flash, and I have this big Rogue flash bender on the back, now my light source is this big instead of this big. So now it's softer. And I get a more consistent light, less shadow. So again, every time I'm on location, I've got my flashes on a stand, and I've got 2 flashes. I've got my mag sphere on both. And here's my personal preference of what I do, like in this situation with my little sweet girl. So I've got my flashes on my stand, and they're up like this, and they're both headed out this way, okay? Does that make sense? So my flash heads are pointed this way. I've got my mag spheres on there, and my subject is going to go right in the middle. She's going to get the best light from both flashes because I'm going to aim them out just a little bit, okay? 45, either way. And so then all of a sudden, I can create beautiful light on my subjects without having these giant modifiers. Have anybody ever tried to use a giant umbrella outside when it's windy? Right? You have a Mary Poppins moment where you're hanging onto the umbrella and you're flying away. So sometimes, looking at some modifiers that are a little bit more sensible for outside, and you can bend, you can create the light that you want on the go, and it's really fast and easy. It's a great idea. Check out MagMod. I really think you guys would like it. Again, whenever I'm doing a session with kids, I'm trying to get mom and dad every single time, mom and dad. If you're not doing it, I promise it will add sales to your bottom line because every single couple needs to see themselves together. Because this is their life right now. At 6 o'clock in the morning, at 7 o'clock at night, at 2 o'clock in the morning, at dinner time when all of a sudden today we don't like green beans. And sometimes that can be very consuming. And so coming back to this, the very beginning where it all started, is so important for couples. And then again, that happens too. So sometimes this happens like a lot with boys. And I never take those out because I think they're special and funny, and I think later in life those are the things that they'll treasure. So even though a lot of times, portraits, it's like, everything should be perfect and everyone should be like posed just right. Sometimes, expression is more important than perfection. And so let them be expressive and then you have a different thing. And then sometimes we throw leaves at our kids because we're mean. But sometimes they throw them at themselves. But we go back to triangles again. Every time we have a family together, we're trying to create some kind of triangle. Just trying to create that triangle so that we get the good look that we know people are going to buy this image. We know every single time they're going to buy it. Sometimes we're stuck in small places like a bridge or whatever, and we don't have all the room in the world, but we still make it work. And I promise you, as a portrait photographer, people will call you and tell you that they want pictures at their house, and their house is huge. And it's so nice. And then you get there, and you're working in an 8x8 room. Has that happened to anyone? That's happened to me so many times. So you just have to know how to bend light. This year, when you're in your living room with your family for the holidays, and you have 25 people crammed into a 12x12 room, and everybody wants you, because you're the photographer, you're the one who loves photography, you can take a picture of everyone, right? So they want you to be able to take everyone over to the sofa, which happens to be in front of a giant bay window, and the sun's out, blazing hot on everybody's heads, and so their faces look totally dark. And what are you going to do? How are you going to create that image? So the first thing we know is that if you take one flash and you point it at them, what's going to happen? There's going to be shadows everywhere. Aunt Betty is going to be dark. Uncle Joe is going to be totally gone. And somebody in the front is going to be like, oh, right? So what we have to do is think about, we're on the go, man. I didn't bring all my gear. I didn't know they were going to have me do a session today. So where am I going to get a bigger light source than just my tiny flash head? So all of a sudden we start looking around rooms for solutions, and we find out that most ceilings are white, right? So maybe if I take my flash toward a ceiling or a wall, or let's say that everybody's in front of me on the sofa and I've got two flashes with me, I'm going to take my flashes and I'm actually going to point them at those back two corners, because then light's going to come from both directions. And I'm going to be able to get the image that I need to get to prove to everybody that I really am a photographer after all on Christmas. So thinking about light sources and how you can make your light bigger, how you can make your light better anywhere you are without anything else. I have used sheets, like white sheets, if I forgot a reflector, which of course that never happened, but you know, if it would happen, you know. I love to tell this story that when I very first started in portraiture, I was taking pictures of a friend's set of twin boys, and they were 3 months old, which you all know, I already told you, is my least favorite age, just for photography, not like in general. And so I had these two boys outside, and it's the fall, and I had gotten like corn stalks and hay and pumpkins, and I get outside and it's the heat of the day, and the sun's like beating down on the tops of their heads, but their faces are dark, and I'm thinking like, how am I gonna, you know, I didn't know anything. I was just playing around. How am I gonna get light to these kids? So I went inside and I had this mirror. Yeah, go ahead and laugh, because this is where it's going. So I had this giant mirror, and I brought it out and I set it up and reflected light back at these kids. Now, no one knows the kids, you know, I probably blinded them forever. But I was learning, and I was using whatever I had to try to create better light. And so don't be afraid to try something that seems silly. If it's a cookie sheet, it could work. You know, you're going to have a lot of contrast, but at least you're getting more light. And so let yourself explore those things, because anything can become a way to make your light better. And so start using things, even silly things like walls or mirrors. Don't use mirrors, because that actually was really not good, but anyway. So again, all the time I'm going to keep saying that I'm always going to meter for my background. Does everyone know what that means? Because I don't want to talk over anybody's heads. So I'm going to meter for my background, right? You know what I mean? Shake your head if you know what I mean. You guys aren't very talkative. We need those drinks in here, stat. No, just kidding. So does everyone know what I mean when I say meter for the background? Okay, no? Okay, that's okay, because I'm glad you said it, because I want to make sure that I'm not talking over people's heads. So in your camera, when you're reading your meter and it's telling you that you're right there in the middle, we want that to be on the background of the sky, not on the person. Because let's just pretend like I've got the sun behind me, and there's this beautiful white puffy clouds in the sky. And I want to get those clouds. And I want the sky to look all magical. So as soon as I put that meter on the person whose back is to the sun, I'm going to have to give myself more light. So as soon as I give myself more light, my sky's gone. So I want the sky perfect, and then I can bring light in to perfect the person, the subject, what I'm doing. Now we can try that with a reflector. So again, the only problem with the reflector, because they can be really useful and I love using them, I take them on every shoot. How many of you own a reflector? Raise your hand. Okay, I love my reflectors. So the only problem is if your subject has eyeballs, a lot of times in bright daylight, they can get their eyes burned right out of their heads. Or you got this. You know, I'm trying to look at you, but they really can't see you because they're blind. So as soon as I bring in a reflector, I know that I'm dealing with human beings who have sensitive eyes. You ever notice people with blue eyes have even more sensitive eyes than people with brown eyes? Because the lighter the eyes, the more light is let in. So we've got to be really careful with our subjects that we don't blind them with reflectors all the time. So when you introduce that flash that I was telling you about, and you put your flashes on 45 on either side, and you use that modifier to make your light bigger, you create a really beautiful light zone in the middle. And I don't like calling it a kill zone, but sometimes I do say that. But you know what I'm saying. The area where it looks the best. So we're going to get into couples in just a minute, but before we do, I wanted to show you a little bit more about kids and playing. And I really do mean that when these things happen, and they happen all the time, I welcome them and I let kids be silly. In fact, sometimes if we come into the studio and we're really nervous and we don't know if we want our picture taken, we do jumping shots first. So I'll be like, oh, can you just go over there and jump up and down for me? And then I ask them to jump higher, and then all of a sudden they're like up in the air and they have a weird look on their face, and I show them the picture, and all of a sudden we connected. And now I get to do whatever I want, because I'll let them jump 10 times and then I get 5 pictures, and then they can jump 10 more times and then I get 5 more pictures. And by the time they leave, they're ready for a nap. My parents are like, yes. For those of you who are child photographers, one other thing that I love to touch on, and just for a second, your clients are women. Do not be deceived. They are the ones spending the money. They're the ones making the decisions about the pictures. They're the ones making the decision about which photographer they're going to use. And they will be the ones deciding whether or not they will come back to your studio. So if their child comes into your studio or meets you at the park, and you act for 5 seconds like that child was not behaving well, that mother will instantly feel guilty. Raise your hand if you're a mom and you've felt guilty about your children's behavior in the past. Because that would be every mother in here. Because moms get like emotionally attached to that crap, and they're like, if you don't behave, I'm gonna blah, blah, blah. But the truth is, moms they feel bad. And if they ever feel bad while you're photographing them, they will not be back. And so you have to be able to rein in whatever you're feeling. And I say things like this, oh, it's totally normal for a 2-year-old. Oh, don't worry about it. He's being great. Look at this beautiful image. And then after they leave, I'm like, oh my gosh, that kid, he ran me ragged, But never in front of mom and dad. Mom and dad need to feel like it was the best experience ever and their kid is a giant angel, even if they're not. And I will tell you that that is the best piece of advice I can give you, because as mom comes into the studio to view the images, if you've got great images and you show her those images and she never felt bad, she will look at those images and that's all she'll remember of the session. And that's the most important thing, because she's the one deciding how much money is going to be spent. And so as soon as she comes in and she sees the images, she's going to say, I remember we had a great time, I never felt bad, and I'm going to buy these pictures, and we're coming back to this photographer for Christmas and fall pictures and spring pictures. And all of a sudden you have a client and not just a drive-by shooting, because it happens. I love stuff like this. I know the rule of portraiture is if you don't have the eyes, you don't have a portrait, but things like this just make me so happy. And so sometimes those are the things that we get. And this next picture is one of my favorites. That's why I always put it in here, because he's so crazy and had so much fun doing this. And this is my Pinterest moment. So I'm going to touch Pinterest for 1 second. Moms always go on Pinterest and find these crazy ideas of things that they want to do, right? They bring me crocheted hats, booties, fire hat things, all kinds of crazy stuff. And every time I look at them, I'm like, oh my gosh, really? But I always shoot 20% for the client, 80% for myself. So it's like I know what I need to get, and then I'll give them a few little whatever they want. Sometimes you just have to stack things up because you just run out of space. And how are you going to keep a 2-year-old and a newborn baby all in the same reach as dad and get a good image? So sometimes we just stack things up in the studio. This was kind of one of my random images. Again, you'll get a moment with a 2-year-old, but you better have your shutter above 200 or you're not going to get an image. And I love pictures like this because it really is expressive of the child, and I think that's so important, because these moments last like 2 seconds. If you have children, you know what I mean. My son is 15. I don't know when that happened. I don't know how it happened, but he's 15 and he's going to be driving. But, it goes so fast. And I wish I have billions of pictures of him, and I wish I had more pictures. So you can't really kind of overdo it. Does she look like the little girl on Monsters, Inc. to anybody? What's her name? Boo? Boo! She looks just like Boo. Anyway, We do a lot of cake smashes. The big piece of advice I'll give you for babies this age, like 6 months, 3 months, mirrors. Because they absolutely love, don't use it for a reflector, but they love looking at themselves. And they think they're so fascinating. And so I love mirror shots of babies. You know, and again, everybody is going to bring you their tutus and everything else that they want you to use. And those things are great. And again, I love showing a bunch of images because I just want, like, 2-year-olds and babies don't really mix. So be really careful if you have a newborn and a 2-year-old, because if you give the 2-year-old the baby, they're going to drop it on the floor because they have no concept of what that means. So a lot of times we'll do baby in basket or laying down or something like that, but never really holding. Before we I don't want to get really extremely technical because I want you guys to leave not feeling confused. For you girls, you'll understand what I mean when I go to a hair salon and they do my hair and it looks so awesome, and then the next day I wake up and try to do it and I'm like, what happened? That's not what it looked like yesterday. So I don't want you to leave feeling like you can't repeat things that we're talking about doing today. This is not my image. I pulled it off the internet because I think it's so useful to understand the exposure triangle and to know that there are 3 ways to get light. I feel like people get so confused and overwhelmed with all the buttons on their cameras and all the ways you can do things and all this crazy stuff. And I will tell you how I do it. Now, I shoot in manual, okay? When I walk into a room or outside or go somewhere, the first thing I ask myself is, where does my aperture need to be? Some of this is a preference thing because I really like shooting wide open. So I will open my aperture wide up, and if I have a 1.8 lens, that's where I'm going to shoot. If I'm not shooting like 5 people. If I'm not shooting multiple subjects, I want to shoot as wide open as I can. So I'm at 1.8, maybe I'm going to go up to 2.5. So just know for me personally, my aperture is the first thing I decide. And then I look at my room. If I walk into a dark room like this, I'm going to be like, man, I'm going to be at like 2500 ISO. I know I want to shoot wide open, then I have to decide what my ISO is going to be, right? So if I'm outside and it's bright sunlight, I'm probably more than likely going to be shooting, what? 100. Obviously, I love to stay around 200 when I can because I feel like it's optimal, but I'm going to be shooting in bright sunlight at 100. If I'm in a really dark room, I'm going to come up as much as I need to. And then once I've decided those 2 things, the way I'm going to control light in my camera for the most part is my shutter. So for those of you who are starting out, I just want to give you that foundation that if you just walk in knowing what aperture you want to shoot at and figure out what your ISO needs to be, you can control the rest of the light with your shutter. Okay? If you're shooting children, you're not going to shoot at 1/50th of a second though. Just making that clear. It needs to be 1/200th or better for kids. And if they're runners, you're going to have to go even higher than that, 1/400th. So I just love to share that because I think it can take all that information and compact it down into one little small thing. You only need to know 3 things. You need to know how to get light. And the only way, these are the 3 ways to do it. ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. And I love to use this as my way to change quickly because I have one little dial that I can change very quickly to go darker or lighter in my exposure. So that's just my own personal preference how I do it. I find it very useful. So again, I'm just going to tell you from my perspective as a professional, your clients are women. I don't care who's writing the check or giving you the credit card, your clients are women. And so if you want to be a successful photographer in any kind of portraiture that has a woman in the picture, it's definite that there's no one else in charge except her. And I say this all the time and people laugh at me, but I will tell you that if mom looks good in a picture, dad's eyes could be closed, Johnny's got his finger up his nose, doesn't matter. It's going on the wall because mom looks awesome. And if you don't learn anything else, learn that women do not like to look fat. Women do not like to look like they look wide. They don't like to look like their arms are flabby. And they don't like double chins. So if I tell you anything at all today, I will tell you that you could have everything wrong about an image. You can have the wrong exposure. You can have the wrong composition. You can have, you don't even know what the rule of thirds is. It doesn't matter. If a woman looks good in a picture, she will buy it. Nothing else matters. So if you can get some posing rules down that will change and rock the way that you do pictures, you will be more successful than any other techniques I could show you today. Okay, do you believe me? Shake your head. Because I'm a woman and I'm just saying, like, I'll have women call me and be like, well, how much is it going to be? Because I, really don't have a lot of money to spend on this. In the back of my mind, all I can picture is this lady with a Louis Vuitton bag and Coach boots, and I already know. It's all about perspective and bringing the value back to what's important. And so it's always, you're going to look so good. I know how to pose. You're going to look so good. So really quickly, we're going to go through a very, we can kind of go a little bit into this and ask some questions and stuff, but is there actually a couple here, like a couple that came together? Oh, this could get fun. All right. So there isn't a couple, so we're just going to pretend like somebody's a couple. But the first thing we're going to do is I want to just show you the difference between me standing here just not paying attention and me standing here actually giving myself height and bringing my shoulders back and standing at attention, and how different that feels. And if I ask all of you to sit up really straight and tall really quick, the whole room will change. So everybody sit up really straight and tall. Yeah, so the whole room changed, everybody moved, and you all look like a foot taller. I'm not even kidding. Yay, good job. So that's the first thing, is that most people don't stand naturally up straight and tall. People's posture stinks. So as soon as we get into a situation where we're photographing people, the only thing that the woman is concentrating on is her face. Like, how does my face look? And what do I do with my hands? So we have to be able to be professional enough to take the attention away from the fact that we're taking a picture. I know that sounds stupid and counterintuitive, but it's the truth. As soon as I'm giving enough instructions that you're not paying attention to my camera anymore, I win. And I'm going to get great images, and you're going to forget that I'm taking your picture. And that's the whole point, is for us to be able to have that kind of intimacy. While I'm talking to you and directing you, you feel completely comfortable because I'm in control, and it doesn't really matter because you're only doing what I tell you. So, double chins. I always say this, I'm going to say it till I'm blue in the face. Every subject in your picture only gets one chin. One chin per subject. And it's super important because I've had actually professional people ask me to retake pictures that they had done to go in magazines because they said they gave me a double chin. And women, if you give them a double chin, they will never forgive you, never forget it, and they will never, ever come back to you. Because a double chin is like, that's bad. Okay, that's like, 40 extra pounds. So always we're going to be elongating our neck as much as we can. And people don't do that naturally because it's not natural to do. So we're going to elongate, and we're going to bring down a little bit, okay? We need to elongate the chin. And it's really easily done if you just ask people to draw their chins out towards you. Yeah, and then just come down a little bit. And then all of a sudden I've eliminated a double chin. Why is that important? Because I want that client to come back to me. And if you give somebody a double chin, they're telling everybody too. She doesn't take good pictures. And you could have like the best, most intricate lighting setup, but if you give somebody a double chin, you're going to have a bad name. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, whenever I look at anybody hate their arms? Girls, come with me, right? So as soon as I'm standing somewhere and I'm getting ready to get my picture taken, as soon as somebody pulls out a camera, you will see me do it every single time. I automatically turn to the side, my arm goes up on my hip, and I bend my front leg. It's a natural thing for me now because I know that's the way I'm going to look best in an image. Because when I turn this way, I look wider. All of me is exposed to the camera, but as soon as I turn to the side, I just halved my size, created a nice triangle here, right? Triangle, triangle on the leg, and now I'm going to turn my chin out, and I'm going to push it out every single time and push it down, because I know that's how I'm going to look best. Women don't know that. Okay, so that's exactly why if you're distracting them enough with those instructions, you can give them an opportunity to have a great image. And if you leave a woman's arm flat against her body like this, it looks double what it looks like this. And I'll do it again. So I'm going to push against my body with my arm, and then I'm going to bring it off. And you can see a giant difference in the size of my arm. And if you give a woman a squishy arm monster, which is what I call that, she's also not going to forgive you. Arms off the body, always. Arms off the body. If it bends, bend it. That's another rule that I follow every single time. If you got something that bends, bend it. Also, guess what? Whatever's closest to the camera looks biggest. So I'm never going to ask my woman to put her weight on her front hip, on her front foot, because now her hip is closest to the camera. So now all of a sudden she thinks she has a double chin and a big booty. And you're done. So arms off, bend, and give yourself the ability to give people beautiful images. When I'm photographing couples, generally these are my couples that I'm going to be photographing for their engagement session, and then we're going to do wedding pictures. Guys are props. Sorry. Okay, you are there to hide anything that is not flattering about a woman. That's what you are there for. You can look large. You can stand straight onto the camera. There is nothing wrong with your arms looking big, because your arms looking big looks like muscles. Our arms looking big looks like fat. That's different. So I use all of my guys as a prop. You stand there, and then I hide her stuff that she doesn't want to see with you. And I'm going to show you how to do that in just a second. So sometimes you're going to get perfect couples who look great. They don't have double chins or flabby arms. And guess what? You still have to follow the same rules, because a woman's arm against her body looks bigger than she wants it to look, even if she has little teeny chicken arms. It doesn't matter. Always follow the rule. No arms against the body. So when I bring my couples in, and I put in pictures of like what my flow would naturally be, so that you could see what I'm actually trying to create with these couples, and not just, oh yeah, this is a good picture or whatever. So I like doing weird perspectives, and with this image in particular, you have to be really careful with double chins. If you lay a woman flat down on the ground, her face is going to look so fat, it's going to be ridiculous. So we always try to bring in this element of them laying on each other's shoulders, so that it's not a flat on look, because then all of a sudden it's bad. Don't do that. Okay? Girls know what I'm talking about right now. But guys are always my prop, and I want to show you exactly specifically what I mean. So can I get 2 volunteers? A guy and a girl, preferably. Someone volunteer? No? Okay, Bruce, will you come up here? I won't bring anybody up from the class. I'll make Bruce come up. So I'm going to give you an example of exactly what would happen in one of my engagement sessions. So a bride and groom come in, and we're going to do the engagement session. This is Bruce. Everybody give Bruce a hand. Yeah, Paige. And Paige is going to come up too. Give Paige a hand. So we're going to pretend like these guys are engaged, and I'm getting ready to photograph them. And Paige is like super skinny, so we're really not having to worry about anything with her, but we're going to pretend like she's not perfect.
The sweater might help.
So yeah, the sweater will help. So come together, and mind you, this is just a couple that's really not a couple, so
We
come on.
work together.
They work together, but don't, shh. Anyways, don't be awkward. If I have Paige bring her arm up on Bruce,
Then I'll laugh.
then all of a sudden her arm is completely exposed. And if they were closer, her arm would be like this.
Good.
So now all of a sudden her arm is not how I want her arm to be, but I do want the pose. So I got to bring Bruce up here like this to hide Paige's arm. Because Bruce's arm can look as big as Bruce's arm needs to look. Thank you, guys. I might call you back up in a minute. So Bruce's arm can look huge, and it doesn't matter, but as soon as Paige's arms look big, I've lost her. And as soon as she gets that image, she's going to hate me ever. So we have to be super careful with those arms, okay? That's one thing. Now, if I have a couple that's super, easy to work with and I can do stuff like this, then I do. But again, she is going to totally love all of these images because we've already drawn her arm off of her body. So she's not going to have that problem. Now, once we get into couples posing, there's a couple things to think about. You can do a lot of different stuff. There's so many different poses out there. I'm actually working on a posing guide right now for couples because some of the stuff that's out there is like a little crazy. But I want you to remember that the longer and leaner a woman looks, the better chance you have of selling her images and winning her over for a lifetime. So we're always going to concentrate. Again, if you look at this image up here, look at all the triangles. You see the triangle on her leg, the triangle on her arm. He's got a triangle. He's got a triangle up here. So as soon as I get people into a pose, I'm looking for all the ways I can bend them. I want to bend them as much as I can bend them so that I can create the most flattering look possible. And again, that's another thing that we're doing. As soon as I turn to the side and I elongate my body, I'm no longer slouchy, I'm no longer scrunchy, and I'm making myself taller and making myself leaner. So that's another thing to remember when you're talking about posing. Is everyone following me for this? So if I bring a woman in and I know that she's got arm issues, I'm going to make sure, and I just want to tell you, if you bring a woman in, she has arm issues. So if you doubt it, just don't. It's true. Every single woman hates her arms and works really hard to try to make them less flabby. And so whenever I get a couple like this and I'm trying to get this intimate pose, I'm always trying to get some eye connection with the camera and taking an opportunity to even do something small like bringing her thumb up so it's actually touching the skin onto the back of his neck creates an intimacy that I didn't have if her hand was just on the shirt collar. Does that make sense? So I'm always looking for ways to have them connecting as much as possible. Now, one of the things that you're going to run into while you're doing portraiture with men and women is height differences. So when I have a bride and groom, and the groom, in this instance especially, was really, really tall. She was tall too, but he was really tall. He was like 6'5". And so every time I try to get them into a pose, he's like way taller than her. And so then I'm in a situation where I'm like, how am I going to get the height to be fixed unless I'm going to carry an apple box around with my flashes on the stand and my bag full of goodies and all my other stuff that I have to carry around for my engagement session. So I've learned really quickly how to create a cure for the height differences, and the way that we do that is by simply asking our gentlemen to separate their feet a little bit. And as soon as I take myself from standing in an upright position like this and separate my feet, I've dropped inches off of my height. So now all of a sudden, if I'm in a situation where there are two different heights, I can create beautiful poses, and all I've done is ask them to do a simple motion of just separating their feet. I will warn you that if you ask them to do that for too long, they'll feel like their legs are going to fall off, so you do need to give breaks in between because people are getting a leg workout when they're doing that. So can you come up for me? Yeah, just for a second, because I think I'm taller than you. And I just want to show you, like if I wanted to do a pose with them and with her, and I wanted her to be like behind me for this pose, and I was going to do an over-the-shoulder pose, I'm way too tall, and there's no way she's going to be able to do this. And by the way, this is a normal situation. For those of you photographing couples, am I lying? This is normal, right? The guy's this much taller than the girl. So then you get there and you're like, I really want to do that over-the-shoulder pose, and I really don't want to do a piggyback ride. So how am I going to do it? And it's very simply just asking him to separate his feet. As soon as he separates his feet, she can bring her arms over his shoulder, and we can get the shot that we want. Am I making sense? Okay, thank you. So separating the feet is a huge way for you to take something that could be like a pose ender and just have them separate their feet. Same way for her, if he's a little bit shorter or maybe they're the same height, she can also separate her feet so that you can create beautiful poses. And you definitely don't want to photograph a bride and groom. If she's taller than him, even a little bit, make it look like he's taller. Just do him that favor. It's a nice thing to do. And then remember, everything that I told you before about family portraiture still applies. So we're going to do a wide shot, and then we're going to do a closer shot, and then we're going to do a really close shot. And whenever we're doing couples for engagement or weddings, I always have to remind myself that these guys spent a lot of money on this ring. And they want it featured in these images. And so we always make sure the ring is turned the right way, that it's facing the camera, that it's in a good light, and we always try to get some shots of the ring on her finger because it's super important. And on wedding day, we feature it even more. We're going to take it, we're going to put it on the cake or on the flowers or on the shoes or in the middle of the dance floor, whatever you're going to do. Just don't stick it in a pond or something and then lose the ring because that's bad. So just thinking in terms of how people feel when they're doing something is really important. And by that I mean this. Photographers should photograph what is being felt or what they feel. And so a lot of times if I'm at a wedding, how many of you are married? Raise your hands. Okay, sometimes this question can go a little south, so we'll try to keep it on the up and up. How many of you remember how you felt when your bride was walking down the aisle towards you on your wedding day? Like, you remember? So I won't ask what that feeling was, because that's sometimes where it can go a little crazy. But when I'm doing a wedding and I'm photographing the groom's face as the bride is walking down the aisle, here's what I'm thinking that I'm trying to photograph. Not his face, but what he's feeling. So I'm thinking that this groom is feeling nervous. Shake your head if I'm right. So he's feeling nervous, right? He's feeling overwhelmed a little bit. He's feeling really humbled by the fact that this beautiful woman is walking down the aisle and giving her life to him. He's feeling like he might be a little crazy because she's been acting really nutty before the wedding trying to plan everything. But I'm looking at him and I'm feeling all of that with him. And that's why when I'm photographing a groom's face, it isn't just the groom standing there. We're photographing something that is way deeper than that. When I'm photographing the bride walking down the aisle with her dad, and her dad has tears in his eyes, and she's shaking underneath her dress, but you can't see that, and she's sweating, and she's so nervous, and she's wondering if she can make it up the aisle because everyone's staring at her, and she's actually really shy and doesn't want people looking at her. Those are all things that I am connecting to when I'm taking pictures of my bride and groom. So I guess what I'm asking you today as photographers is to remember that we're photographing what is actually happening, not just on the surface and with what we can see with our eyes, but what is happening inside of people as we're photographing them in situations like weddings and things like that. Does that make sense? Everybody with me? So I'm asking you to take that with you when you're looking for situations where you're going in and you're going to photograph things. You don't know someone's situation. You don't know where their family is right then. You don't know if they fought all the way there. They probably did, because actually getting ready for portraits is really stressful. Who knows that? Who's done it? If you have never done family portraits and you're a photographer that does family portraits, I highly recommend doing family portraits and going to find matching outfits and then making your kids wear something that they don't want to wear. And then showing up to smile for pictures. And I'm only saying that because I think it's really important to be able to connect to your subjects. And every year we do family pictures, and if you're a photographer and you have children, your hardest subject to photograph is your own children. Because I don't know what it is, their eyes are closed, they don't want to do it, they're upset. There's actually a whole page on Facebook dedicated to outtakes of photographers photographing their families. And the reason why that I'm bringing that up to you is to let you know that you don't know people's situation. Maybe before they got to your studio, they were fighting the whole time. Maybe before they got to your studio, the kids were crying and mom's all stressed out because, Johnny's got snot rockets and everything's happening. I can't control anything. Those are the real things that happen to people before you're photographing them. So remember, you're the calming force when they come in. You're excited to take their pictures. Their kids are not being bad. Everything's wonderful. And then you're going to take pictures of this family so they can have them forever. Back to weddings, which is what started me on this, with watching the groom's face and really realizing what you're photographing and understanding what's actually going on in the undercurrent of the situation. It's so super important. This image, this couple had just been through the hardest rain this year that I've ever seen in my life at a wedding. It was literally raining sideways. And at the end of the rain, we got this beautiful sky. But in the undercurrent of it all was this like relief. Finally, we get to get some good wedding pictures, because the rest of the time it had been inside and it was pouring down rain, outdoor wedding at a vineyard. I mean, you know, that's stressful. And so when we get to a moment like this, it's like finally being able to relax. And I get that. And so that's what I'm photographing. Again, you'll see, even in this image down here where I'm at, bring your arm away from your body, hide her arm with your arm. And she's a tiny girl, but I know she's going to hate her arms if they're hanging out. Also, the other thing, most girls wear strapless gowns. And when they wear a strapless gown to their wedding, their arm is completely exposed, the skin. And as soon as the light hits it, it like beacons off of the arm, drawing all the attention to the arm. So that's another great reason to cover that up a little bit so that the light isn't reflecting off of it and creating this like, oh. Sometimes you have to steal a moment. You're in the middle of the road and the sun is setting and you just got to stop and do something, because it's going to take, this second is going to be gone. And so you just have to take it. I'm always looking for different angles, ways that I can pose my brides and grooms so that I can get images that they are going to be able to keep forever. And you know, the thing about weddings is there's no do-over. It's not like, oh, well, today it rained sideways, so we're just going to do it tomorrow. Well, nope, you've got today. That's it. And so I love weddings because of that, but it's not for everyone because of that. Some people find that stressful. I actually think it's awesome. So when I'm photographing my couples, I know that this kind of stuff, they're going to love this. They're going to love all of these. And so that's what we're going for. Little moments. Stealing away, getting these looks. And you'll see in all of those, I always want to have a little bit of a touch on skin. Just a little bit. So the question was, when I have the flashes at the 45 degrees and they're together on the same stand, because I use a dual bracket, when they're together on that same stand, is there a middle area that doesn't get enough light? And the great thing is that, again, if I put my subject right in the middle, so those flashes are at 45 degrees like this, and my subject's right in the middle, my subject's getting the softest part of the light on both sides of those mag spheres. Does that make sense? So there isn't really a zone in the middle that doesn't get anything. Thank you guys so much. You're amazing.
Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, B&H has the answers to your questions. Experience a world of technology at our New York City Superstore. Connect with us online or give us a call. Our staff of experts is happy to help.